Hello and welcome to another edition of Choose to Challenge. I am LaWanna Bradford. And on this platform, me and my guests have those challenging conversations. And this episode is no different. Why? Because it's Mental Health Awareness Month. And this month, every single show is going to be dedicated to the fight against mental illness, the fight to enhance our awareness, the fight to stop the stigma and biases around mental health, and to create a conversation to shift the narrative where the importance of mental health is just as important as physical health. We want it to be that commonplace conversation that everyone feels comfortable to have, because we never know who is going through challenges and situations. And what's amazing is studies have shown that 1 in 5 individuals in their lifetime are going to face some mental challenge. They're going to go through something, whether it's depression, whether it's anxiety. And sometimes we don't think about those things and how they can impact our lives, our families, even our ability to earn an income. Because if we're not well mentally, we just don't feel like doing anything, right? I think we've all been there at some point, and some have been there in a darker space than others, where they've even thought about taking their lives. And we know that the suicide rates are on the rise, especially with our youth. Today we have a very special guest who's coming on, and I'm going to bring her to the stage right now. And this is none other than the amazing LaChelle Adkins. LaChelle, how's it going?
It is going well. And thank you so much, LaWanna, for having me. Such a great conversation. This is something that I'm very passionate about. So I am excited to be here today and share with your audience.
Thank you for saying yes. I know you are a woman on the move. You're busy, you're traveling, and you just got back in town. And I know that mental health is a passion of yours for many reasons. But I want to tell the audience just a little bit about you if they have not yet met you. LaChelle Adkins is known as America's Supermom, and that means just that. She is an amazing, wonderful mother of 15 children. Yes, you heard it correctly. 15. I did not stutter. And she is also an entrepreneur. She's a serial entrepreneur. She wears many hats. She's a TV podcast host. She's an author. She's a speaker. She's a trainer and educator in the area of marketing and management. And she also is an advocate of mental health and mental awareness.
Mm-hmm.
And why? Because she has her own story to share. And so we're going to dig a little bit deep into what mental health means to her.
Mm-hmm.
And she will share some pieces of her story.
Mm-hmm.
And it is a very real situation that many people face.
Mm-hmm.
And I know some people feel like, oh, it's just nothing. Oh, they just need to suck it up, right? But it's actually a disease. It's an illness.
Mm-hmm.
It's not about just sucking things up. Some
Mm-hmm.
things are genetic, some things are environmental. But we know in this amazing body of ours, sometimes things get a little out of whack, and we find ourselves not knowing what to do or where to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so with you, LaChelle, when did you, just in your journey, because I know you've shared your story with me before, when did you realize, Mayday, something's not quite right here?
Yeah. I think this is a great question because, for me and my story, which is what has me so passionate, is that I didn't really see the signs. I called myself functionally depressed. So, for me, I thought depression was, somebody who's in the bed. They don't have any motivation. They just don't want to do anything. They want to crawl under a rock and not exist anymore. So when I was busy taking my kids to soccer or going on field trips and all these things that were preoccupying me, I didn't realize that, it was a recipe for disaster. And I was just really numb in a lot of areas. I was just really just trying to keep my head above water. And it had gotten to be such a routine that I was really kind of just not even attuned to the fact that things were not right. It was just, how can I make it through another day? I was on autopilot, survival mode, not sleeping right, putting everybody else's needs before my own. And in each of my cases with my hospitalization, it was my husband who sought intervention for me. So it just got to the point where he was like, I go to bed and you're awake. I wake up and you're awake. And, he was like, when do you sleep? And it was just a number of things that I was just burning the candle at both ends. And that was really my story. And I think for a lot of people, we kind of get those signs that, okay, you haven't slept, you are running on empty and you're not eating right, no self-care. And the thing about my situation, I think that kind of did spare me in a lot of cases was that I did have the children. They had me functional. I was making sure they got to school on time. We had a routine for homework and all these kind of things, but it was just me depleting everything I had for myself. So people on the outside didn't see the warning signs.
What you're saying is really, really powerful. So there's two, actually there's three pieces. So I want to just dissect this a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first thing you said is because of your children.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't matter whether you have 1 or 15, your responsibility to your children puts you on autopilot.
Mm-hmm.
You said it kept you functional.
Mm-hmm.
But in that functionality, you were blinded to signs that you may have otherwise seen, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, I'm going to chuck this off to being a little tired or maybe a little stressed because of X, Y, and Z, but you didn't really just sit in, is this normal? Should this be happening, continuously? And so that's one piece.
Mm-hmm.
So thank God for your children,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because in some cases, just in our conversation, they served as that lifeline for you.
Mm-hmm.
And you think about women, especially because women tend to suffer more from depression than men. It doesn't mean that men are excluded, but women have higher numbers. But imagine someone who's living alone and doesn't have that, right? Doesn't have that person to care for or to be there for, and they sink into this abyss. So we got that piece. But then you said that your husband intervened. What did he see? I think you said it was a sleep deprivation that had him concerned, right?
And it was just like, I had this thing where I had to have everything done today. I was kind of like irrational about timelines. So it was like, oh, I just got to get up. I have to have the kids' stuff together. I mean, it was just like, in some cases, it was like I was the Energizer bunny. And he's like, wait a minute, you haven't had any sleep, and just that constant looking to other people, not really mindful of myself and what my needs were. I think the main thing was just the sleep deprivation, because he was an officer in the military and he worked retail. So at one point, even in our marriage, he had to commute. So he commuted like an hour and a half every day. So he would be, the kids would be asleep when he left, usually sleep when he got home. And he's like, I'm getting home, you're awake, I'm talking to you throughout the day. When are you getting some rest? You're running the kids around, doing all these different things. And, I'm up, I maybe sleep, then I'm nursing. And it's just like, how can you do all these things? So that was really the thing was that everything was a sense of urgency and kind of like, being kind of robotic about things, that he thought something's not right here.
And LaChelle, the one thing that I know in my conversation when I talk to women is, for whatever reason, especially here in America, we applaud ourselves for being able to multitask and have a
Mm-hmm.
gazillion balls in the air,
Mm-hmm.
but at what cost?
Right.
Right? At what cost? And so the third thing you mentioned is hospitalization, that it got so bad that you had to be hospitalized. So however comfortable you are with that, can you take us through
Mm-hmm.
that journey and that experience?
Yeah, so this is the part where my husband sought intervention, because he was like, he would tell me stuff and I was not listening. I was like, honey, I'm okay. You're just overreacting. I'm going to get some sleep, whatever. And, just going back a little bit, I was an only child. So all through my academic career, all I knew was challenging myself, being a high achiever, honor roll, and gifted classes, you name it. So we met in college, and I was a marketing major at a university that was very competitive for the School of Business. You had to test into it. You just couldn't say you want to go. So all that, quote unquote, academic pressure I was used to. But I had the mindset, being an only child, that if I wanted something, I just worked for it. And that was just my philosophy. So when I had children, I just thought, okay, this is just another thing that I have. I can apply these same principles and life is going to be fine. And just the mindset of, not really realizing that these were areas that I was not familiar with. I didn't even have to cook when I was a teenager. I was an only child. I was active in many sports and doing things at school, working and all this other kind of stuff. So I didn't have to do that. So I had to learn how to cook. I had to learn how to navigate, a family on top of being married. Then my husband was a officer in the military. So I had to learn ranking and that kind of stuff. All these different things were just piled on. And, you know, with my background, I just thought asking for help was a sign of weakness. So it wasn't like, oh, I don't know this. Let me get some insight. It was all the pressure to be the best from how I was raised. And so I just took on each one of those different roles with a mindset of things being perfect or excellent. And that was where the pressure was. It was just thinking that I had to have everything checked off my list. And so instead of really realizing, you know what, let me just kind of modify this, let me take it easy. It was just, if I did it all through my academic career, I just didn't know any different. It was like all or nothing with me. And so that was really the problem, was that I just had some unrealistic expectations. And although people would give me compliments on how I seemed to have it all together, it just really didn't resonate with me because the pressure I was putting on myself. I had my own set of standards that were way beyond what other people had for me. And it was crazy. So I, to myself, was telling myself I was a failure, because if I put 7 things on my list of things to do and I only got 2 done, I'm saying, no, look at you. How come you didn't get that done? And then I'm piling more on myself each day instead of saying, maybe this list should be a little smaller because I'm not getting a lot done. It just didn't register to me.
I want to pause in something that you said, and this is speaking again. This is let's choose a challenge. So we talk about everything. So I want to talk about the racial piece within
Mm-hmm.
our community, the African American community.
Mm-hmm.
And you mentioned that you were raised to be the best, to
Mm-hmm.
achieve excellence, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you could ask every single African American household in this country, did you hear these words? You always have to be better, do better, right?
Mm-hmm.
To be accepted, to achieve whatever it is. So imagine always having that pressure. And so that was the standard you were told,
Mm-hmm.
excellence. So
Mm-hmm.
then we in turn self-impose, raise that bar a little bit more
Mm-hmm.
to the point that it becomes impossible to achieve, not because of our inability, but you had all of these other new things coming on, right? A
Mm-hmm.
new you have a new family environment. Then
Mm-hmm.
the military is a family and microcosm all of its own,
Mm-hmm.
and you're trying to still find you
Yeah.
and save you in all of this.
Mm-hmm. And I think, when you are a high achiever, and I mean, I like the fact that you bring that up about the situation of being the best. And I think, those of us that have a academic background, to where we are high achievers, where we have seen a lot of success academically, for us, that is kind of like a reality, because I had cousins and, our upbringing was totally different. I'm over here striving to be the best, and they're just like comfortable, getting the next new pair of shoes. You know what I'm saying? And I'm over here trying to be conscious of building a legacy. You know what I'm saying? So there is something that is a little different, I think, for us that might have had academic success. I was raised in a predominantly Caucasian area and school district, to where a lot of times I was the only African American in my class. And so that pressure was even higher to be, they're asking me, okay, so tell us about slavery. What are your thoughts? And I'm like, what? I don't know anything about it. You know what I'm saying? And so
Yeah, I wasn't
I
there, right?
yeah, so I was groomed very early to be a spokesman, even though I didn't even know what I was being a spokesman about, but all that just kind of fed into the whole idea where, people are looking to hear something from you. So sound educated, be educated, and, never admit that you don't know anything, because, you are kind of taking it for the team. And so I just never had the thing of like, I can't admit that I don't know this, and so the pressure was even greater with that,
As a mother, because we're about to celebrate Mother's Day next
Mhm.
next Sunday, what you know now and what
Mhm.
you've learned and the tools that you've put in place to help you navigate those dark spaces in life. How are you helping to prepare your children should they run into any sort of walls like this, or where they feel stressed or anxious or even depressed?
Yes, I think the first thing is having a dialogue with them. Since my story and journey, I'm very passionate about talking to them about, when you're not feeling well, what that looks like. And sometimes we're not going to have all the answers and have it together. But having people that you feel comfortable with discussing things that, life is going to throw you curveballs. And it wouldn't be a curveball if you saw it coming. So there are going to be things that we're going to be faced with, unexpectedly. We had my father-in-law passed away just this past September, and our 22-year-old daughter didn't take it well. She battled depression. She was hospitalized as a result of it. And it's really been a real hard transition for the children, being able to see her. She's was always the life of the party. And when she struggled with that death, they didn't know how to handle it, And the fact that she was young, it's like they were fearful that it could happen to them. She's on medication now. And, we just never know how things are going to turn out. But I think communication is the first step of really being able to be open about a lot of the challenges because, we all deal with grief differently. We all deal with celebrating things differently. I mean, we just never know how other people can be faced with the different challenges, but having a support system and people that you can talk to, that's the first step of really understanding that when something's not right, you don't have that pressure of feeling like everything has to be perfect. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is really allowing my kids to be different. When I was kind of going through my journey, I measured my success by their success. So if they were making honor roll and doing good in school, or not getting in trouble, all these different things, I was like, oh, I'm doing good. But sometimes that put me in a position to where I really didn't have a relationship with them. I was checking off the boxes of the things that they were quote unquote doing good, but my relationship was estranged because I just had this corporate view that was one of the boxes to check, but not really interacting with them on a one-on-one level. And so now I'm about really giving them the space to pursue the different things that make them who they are. It's not about trying to fit into the mold of everybody looking the same, being the same, but really giving them the comfort to be their unique selves and helping them to navigate with that rather than fitting into the mold that everybody thinks they should be fitting into.
And that lesson that you are teaching your children, and I'm certain just even exemplifying in your day to day, is so key to our listening audience. We are here with LaChelle Adkins, and we're talking about Adkins. We are talking about triumph over darkness, and this is Choose to Challenge. And this episode is dealing with mental health and the conversations that we need to have around mental health. We want to remove the stigmas, remove the biases, be as comfortable talking about mental health as we do about our physical health. And what LaChelle just said is she is really impressing upon her children to be their unique, amazing, divine selves, whatever that may be. And I think, LaChelle, if we as adults can process that and really allow it to reprogram us and say, this is me world, and I'm going to celebrate me to the best of my ability, one day at a time. That in itself takes off so much pressure. Because when you're trying to, live up to someone else's expectations, or you're trying to be like someone or look like a supermodel that has been airbrushed to death, right? But you're trying to be that. That's just adding unnecessary stress and pressure.
So true. And I love what you said about the supermodel that's been airbrushed. And, when we begin to realize that, we only see part of the picture. We don't see the part that's behind the scenes. We don't see the airbrushing, the things that have been touched up. I tell my kids who are, wanting to be TikTok or Instagram famous, you don't know how many times they snapped that photo before they decided to post it. Might be 10 times. It could be 100. Some people are so conscious about creating this illusion that you don't know what goes on behind the scenes. So I have one daughter who's 21. And so she got me into doing these Instagram reels. We had like a little challenge back in August. And so every day we had to post a reel, and we did it together because she didn't know about it. I didn't know about it. And she started having fun doing the reels. And so she was really excited. One day you get 1,000 views. The next day you have 4. It was that back and forth. So she's like, I'm done with Instagram. I want to go over to TikTok. So she wanted to be TikTok famous and get all these different views. So I had a friend who is making money off TikTok. And so I called him and I said, so how does she get paid on this? What's the criteria? And he said, well, you have to have like 10,000 followers and over 100,000 likes or something like that. And then for every million views you get, they pay you $30. And he said he does 40 TikToks a day. So he's working a full-time job. This is an adult, okay, with kids. And he's doing 40 videos a day. So I told her and she was like, no, what? That's a lot of stuff. I don't know about it. But that's my point. They look at how many views somebody gets. They don't realize the time that goes into doing a lot of this stuff because they see the finished product and they don't know what goes into it. So.
Yeah, that's important. I want to just put out this disclaimer that this show is for infotainment purposes only. Neither LaChelle or I are medical professionals, psychiatrists, psychologists, but we are advocates for mental health and mental awareness. And if you or anyone that you know needs support, please reach out to NAMI.org. That's the National Alliance of Mental Illness, or you can call the Suicide Prevention Hotline at 800-273-8355. That's 800-273-8355. You do not have to suffer alone. There are resources, there are people there to help you. And if you feel that in your immediate circle, you don't feel comfortable talking to someone, pick up the phone and dial 800-273-8355. LaChelle, I'm going to take a little commercial break now, and we will be back in a second.
All right.
Hi, I'm Ariana, and I want to talk to you today about why people all over America are talking about the Cuddle Me Love body pillow. This pillow is incredible. It's helping people with health issues, whether body aches, anxiety, stress. People are dealing with some serious issues, loneliness, depression, and this is the perfect gift. Get one for yourself today and get one for those you care about. The Cuddle Me Love body pillow. It's the best. I can't imagine sleeping without it. Get yours today.
We are back. So we thank our sponsors, Cuddle Me Love Body Pillow, which is great to comfort you. As I said, depression, anxiety, body aches. It is a wonderful pillow.
I love it. I have one.
Me too.
I love it. My kids, I had to fight them off, when I got mine. Okay, everybody, I'm looking up, where's my pillow at? So yeah.
Yes, it's an amazing, amazing pillow. What I want to ask you, because we've got a few more minutes, is you went through your journey and you went through hospitalization. Were you, and you mentioned you were in and out of the hospital. At what point did you find yourself feeling like you were finally on the road to recovery?
Yeah, that was not until my last hospitalization. So, I had my first hospitalization, then I had another one. They were not like back to back. What had happened for me was a modification of how things were. So My husband is the youngest of 5 children. I was an only child. So when it came to raising our kids, we just didn't really have any relatives that were close by. And we didn't have a support system. Yeah, we went to church, and, you would have church people that would occasionally help you. But, most of the responsibility we kind of took on our own. So, I was staying home, he was working, and we just thought, okay, this is the arrangement we're going to have. Not really checking in to see, is this working? We're having more kids, more responsibility than what we thought. We just didn't take that time to check in with each other and see. And, with the busy life that he had of being responsible financially for, so many children, we just didn't think about it, to even see if this kind of arrangement was working, how we can modify it. So we would make these temporary modifications. And before we know it, we would revert back to that same activity where he's the only one working and I'm the only one with the kids. And so it wasn't until after my last hospitalization that, I really got clear and just thought, I cannot be blaming my husband, my kids for a lot of these things that are happening for me. I am a common denominator with this. And so that was when I really took some time to reflect and think about, I'm the one that is not saying no. I'm the one that's agreeing to all these different responsibilities, not speaking up, and all the list goes on and on. Not taking time for self-care, I just was not empowered. And so it was after that last hospitalization that I really was afraid that it was going to be a pattern that was never going to stop. I was just, what was going to stop me from having a fourth or a fifth, and the list goes on and on. And so when I realized that if anything was going to change, it was me who had to change it. That's when things turned around, and I really dove into understanding how I was thinking, what were some of my triggers. And so I created a coaching program as a result of it. And I say I was my first client because everything that I wrapped up into that program, I did for myself. And then from that, I just started coaching. And, during the pandemic, I have to thank you and your Celebrate You community because, I was inundated with so many moms that were struggling with working from home, their kids being at home. And so I started creating master classes and everything. And I thought, we talk about, mental wellness and, how it can be a problem when we get overwhelmed, but what are we doing about it? So that's when I came up with a acronym that I call SMILE. And those were the 5 pillars that I tell people to check in daily to make sure that they're proactive with their mental wellness. And that's your sleep, mood, inner voice, laughter, and energy. And so just
I want to pause you right there because I want to give you some time before we close so that you can speak to the audience and break those down a little bit.
Okay. Okay.
That's okay.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Perfect. And so you mentioned your triggers.
Mm-hmm.
How can you, what words of wisdom or guidance can you give to people to know how to recognize their triggers? Because if you're in that dark space, how do you know?
Yeah. Well, I think the first thing is really coming from a place of power. So, when you're telling yourself instead of asking yourself things, that's a problem. So if you're like, I'm always doing this, why are you doing these things? Kind of speaking that way to yourself, that's a red flag. But if you ask yourself, how can I do this differently? What did I learn? Asking a question can definitely be a quick way to transition from any kind of negative mindset. And oftentimes when we're telling ourselves, it's from a place of comparing ourselves to other people, just talking bad down to ourselves, that bully that we have in our head. I say for other people, we look outside of ourselves so much, but nobody really bullies us as bad as we bully ourselves. So when you're telling yourself things rather than asking questions, that's a red flag. The other thing is just unrealistic expectations. You're expecting everything to go perfect. You're trying to manipulate things that are outside of your control and not really being able to have that space to sit back and say, you beat yourself up because you want to go on a trip, but the weather affects it. It's a tornado or whatever. And you're still beating yourself up, over something that's out of your control. Now, that's an extreme example, but a lot of times this is what happens. We get a flat tire and something happens, but because we have constantly found that we are letting ourselves down, we don't even have the ability or aptitude to think that this is an extreme circumstance that I can't control, because it's just another thing to validate how we've been beating ourselves up.
Yeah, there's so much. I know, and you may be familiar with Dr. Amen, who's a neuroscientist and just amazing expert on brain science and brain health. And I think he identified 7 or 9 lanes in depression. Like you said, you were the functional, right? And then we have from functional to clinical and everything else in between.
Right.
And it's something that's a little frightening, given as humanity, we have our issues. As you said, we're going through this journey. And then with the pandemic on top of it, so now we have what's called a second pandemic, which really is the increasing rise in mental health issues and concerns. And to the point that the demand is so great, we are yet to build an infrastructure to handle it. They said that cases with mental health increased 25% around the world. And children hit at just alarming rates, right? Because now they're pulled from their friends, their social circles. We're meant to be social beings, and suddenly people who felt like, I've never had issues, suddenly started to feel after month 6, started ticking by. It's like, okay, this is starting to get a little uncomfortable. So I want to give you time, about 5 minutes or so, to talk about your program, to the SMILE steps, and then how can people register, be a part of this, because I believe that you're offering something to give hope and encouragement for those that feel like there is no way out, or that they are alone.
Well, I really appreciate that, LaWanna, and I'm so glad that we're connected. I think one of the things to also not take lightly is having support. And on a number of occasions with a lot of different programs that I've had or events, I just want to publicly thank you for your support. Sponsoring some activities, and just the list goes on and on. So even having this platform and this opportunity to share with your audience, I am grateful. But I do have a program that I call Fresh Start, and it's 5 pillars that are really a foundation for people who feel like they just cannot get ahead of the depression or overwhelm. And these pillars are something that we dive into in a 6-week program. And they are using your fear as fuel, reframing your story. So understanding that a lot of times when it comes to our past, we want to lock it into a closet, forget about it. But if it wasn't for that past, we wouldn't be the person that we are today. And we can take those lessons and use them to equip us and empower us to be able to have a different direction that we decide to travel in. So knowing how to reframe that is paramount in order to connect the dots between your past and your present so that you can have a better future. The next pillar is envisioning your success. One of the things that was really hard for me was that, I had 13 years of depression. That was I was accustomed to how my kids treated me, or they were accustomed to me doing everything. And so when you envisioning a new beginning, everybody may not be on board with that. And so you have to have these clues or visual reminders to help you to not give up on that vision, because it takes time for people to move beyond what they're used to. And so I had to create screensavers, vision boards, whatever it took to kind of have a different reality from what I was living. And then a support group or a tribe. And I can't say this enough, because, as we continue to evolve and to change, it's important to have a support group where we can do that daily, and we can have the space and empathy to understand that our family may not get it right away. It may take them weeks, months, and sometimes years to adjust to the transition that we're making in our own life. So when you have a support group or a tribe, it helps you to continue to grow and continue to develop and get better, not at the expense of you sacrificing your health or your well-being because your family just isn't on board with who you're becoming. And it gives you that empathy and compassion to understand that they're going to come around whenever they're ready. And then the last pillar is healing. And that is just the constant reminder that everybody can be a victim in your story. So yes, you may be the key player, but because of your story, there's different perspectives and different angles, and you all are connected some way. So healing is something that takes time, and it's a lifetime healing process. And so although you may heal from certain things one way, I use the analogy, if someone injures their leg, somebody might be in a wheelchair, somebody might be on crutches, somebody might just have a brace, somebody might have a limp. Although they all injured their leg, their recovery is different based on how severe that injury was. And so we a lot of times don't know the severity of our injuries until we really begin to dig deep into the root cause and see what's going on. So that is my Fresh Start program. And, I think when it comes to understanding just when our own mental wellness, what are some things that we can and can't control? And so we can control whether we smile every day. And so that is really being mindful about the sleep that we're having, our mood. Yeah, we might have a bad mood every once in a while, but if it's something that goes on for weeks and days upon days, that's something to be considering. Your inner voice, if you're talking and telling yourself stuff rather than asking questions, that's also an indicator that something could be not right. And then laughter, how often are you laughing? If you need a break up in the day, look at some funny videos, cat videos, dog videos, whatever. Break up that monotony with some laughter. And then the last thing is energy, really being mindful of your energy level. We think that we're giving and pouring out of a full cup, but a lot of times our cup is empty. And so we want to make sure that we're filling our own cup up first and giving out of our abundance rather than out of our lack. So again, these are definitely some important things for you to consider. Talk to a friend, call someone on a hotline if you feel like you have to, because you're not alone. I was in that same scenario thinking that no one had it like I did, and just finding that there are so many people out there that don't know how to begin the conversation, but pick up the phone, call someone that you can talk to and that you can trust to kind of help you navigate through these things. And so you can email me, info@LaChelleAdkins.com. I'm on every social media platform because I am passionate about this topic. And I have several YouTube videos that talk about ways that we can handle some of the overwhelm, that are free resources for anybody to kind of get some insight. So again, LaWanna, I just want to thank you so much for having me today. This has just been quite a pleasure, and I'm honored to be able to share some of my insights and wisdom with your audience.
Thank you so much, LaChelle, again for saying yes. You also helped us kick off our mental health wellness panel back in 2020, and all because of the pandemic. We said we need to come together and have this conversation, and this is really a spillover of that. The Choose to Challenge platform was born out of those messages. So I want to just thank you for your voice, and I love this Fresh Start program. And as you said, smile, our mood, checking our inner voice. Are we laughing or not? And I love, find those funny videos, because I know sometimes I'll look at TikTok and I'll find those animal videos and I am just dying laughing.
Yes.
And then energy, right? We really need to tune into, how are we feeling? And it's okay if you feel down from time to time, but it's when you stay down.
So true. And I think the whole thing, like I said, we don't fill our cup up. For me, I was doing the motherly thing, but I was on empty. And so when we fill our cup up, it is a totally different thing. Your car, I'm sure, even feels better when the gas tank is full as when, you're close to empty. For me, it just doesn't seem like it rides the same.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you so much, LaChelle, for being with us. Please, for those that are listening, want to learn a little bit more about LaChelle, if you'd like to have her come and speak on your platform, do some training for you and your community, or if you just want to be a part of the Fresh Start program, her information is below, info@LaChelleAdkins.com. And I promise you it's going to be a wonderful connection. And if anything, if you just need to talk to someone who gets it, contact LaChelle. Again, you are not alone. Together, we can make a difference. Together, we can change the narrative around mental health and mental wellness, right?
That's so true. And again, I just want to thank you for this discussion, because, it is all of us coming together to raise awareness that it makes a difference. You never know who you're going to touch simply with a video, whether it's an Instagram or even just a picture that you can post on your social media platforms talking about the importance of it. So again, I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. And to our listening audience, thank you so much for joining us on Choose to Challenge. Remember that you can choose to change your situation. We know it may not always be easy, and sometimes it takes a community to rally around you, to lift you up, to reinforce you during those dark times. But I promise that when your vision intersects with opportunity, success is inevitable.
Once upon a time, I was out of breathing room. I didn't know what it was called, but I love having a label for it. So if we can define it, we can address it. And so breathing room is that space between your current pace and your limits and your abilities. So in breathing room is really important that we have that space between what we are capable of doing and what our limits are. And it's a very important concept, and is catching on fire with our mommies and our women in our little corner of the world. And I'm so pleased that we will learn more, we will be happier people, and not so stressed out, and we will operate in the love zone and not the fear zone.
Are you ready to defy gravity and challenge the impossible? Meet LaWanna Bradford, the visionary leader behind Choose to Challenge on E360 TV. Now in its 5th season, this groundbreaking show shines a spotlight on voices of change from across the globe. Born during the pandemic, Choose to Challenge becomes a platform for transformation where no topic is off limits. Every episode highlights individuals breaking barriers, rewriting narratives, and making an impact. Ready to share your story and inspire change? Call 404-618-2824 to become a guest. This is your moment to rise. Tune in now at e360tv.com. Your voice matters. Let's change the world together.